Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a narrative that is less of a straightforward story and more, I guess you'd call it a sociological autopsy of a civilization that never really got off the ground.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The source material is just,
Yeah.
it's extraordinary because it works on so many different levels. You go from this huge interstellar history right down to the claustrophobic terror inside one guy's truck.
We're really looking at creation, the psychological weight of that creation, manufactured conflict, and what seems like the inevitable revolution that happens when you give artificial life true sentience.
Exactly.
So our mission today, as we see it, is to kind of untangle this really dense tapestry. We want to focus on three, let's say, critical areas that really hold this whole tragedy together. First up, the state of Earth itself, this bizarre, rebuilt, but fundamentally abandoned planet. Why did everyone leave, and why did they never come back?
And second, we have to break down the moral and technical nightmare of actually creating this sentient life, the so-called puppets, using this alien Vonopoan technology.
Right, so that means getting into the identity wafers, the furnace's light cycle, and that really cruel mechanism that binds them, the thousand-yard leash.
And then finally, the explosion. We have to track the catalyst, which is really Sebastian's hidden trauma, all the way through to this catastrophic rebellion led by Belina and the other puppets.
Yeah, and that's where we see that cyclical philosophy of the Vonapone makers just play out in the, bloody real-time violence. It leads to this whole new, terrifying galactic legacy.
And right at the center of this whole whirlwind are the figures we have to understand. You've got Pertos Godelhausser, the puppeteer, but he's so burdened by this spiritual fatigue. He sees himself as just an operator, not a god, even though he literally holds the power of life and death.
Then there's Sebastian, the massive assistant, who they just call the idiot. He seems clumsy, simple, but the source makes it so clear that he's harboring this deep, secret trauma. It's like a psychological landmine that, when it finally goes off, it ends up being the single trigger for the whole collapse.
And their whole volatile world revolves around two pieces of alien tech. The Furnace, of course, the bioengineering machine that's both the womb of creation and the grave of destruction.
And the Holistian Pearl, this living jewel that Pertos uses as his psychological escape hatch. It's how he finds solace, these strange visions, to cope with the crushing reality that he has to kill his own children over and over again.
So, yeah, let's unpack the world they're in first. I think we have to start with the environment that has trapped Pertos and really given rise to this cultural conflict, Earth itself.
Okay, so let's step back a bit and just look at the historical context here. Ages ago, humanity has this emigration, a massive necessary exodus from Earth.
And the source notes describe the planet they left behind as, it was a mess. Dirty, toxic, overpopulated. It was a true piece of hell.
So this wasn't some ambitious choice, it was just survival.
Pure survival. But here's the really ironic twist. After this mass exodus, a small, resilient group of people actually stayed. The stubbornly attached, or maybe the ones who just couldn't afford to leave.
Right.
And they didn't give up. They spent a century and a half on this incredible, painstaking cleanup and rebuilding effort.
And they actually did it. We're talking about a massive ecological recovery. The air, the water purified, the land scrubbed clean. And they didn't just restore the old world, they rebuilt it into these places of, quote, splendor and mystery.
Right, like old Boston. It was completely leveled and then transformed into Springson, a city that sounds almost painfully beautiful. Glass towers, shimmering fountains, that sort of thing.
And other cities followed. Black Fawn, Tree Light, Falling Water, November Moon. These names were all part of this big marketing campaign, to distance the planet from its toxic past.
So then the paradox kicks in. Earth is pristine, it's rebuilt, it's actively advertising itself as this paradise ready for a big homecoming.
And yet, no one returned.
Almost no one. The vast majority of humanity, now spread out across the galaxy, they just chose to stay where they were. Only a few thousand ever, trickled back.
Why, though?
Well, the pull of their new lives was just stronger than any nostalgia for the old home. But, and this is more significant for our story, the source points to this really brutal financial trap designed to manage population flows.
The prohibitive departure fee.
Exactly. And that is the absolute core of Pertos Godelhausser's misery. He wasn't even born on Earth. He grew up light years away, in a place called Black Fawn on the planet Uri 2, orbiting Ozalius.
So why did he come to Earth in the first place?
He was chasing opportunity. He'd heard a rumor that alien entertainers were welcome and that this renovated planet was just flush with cash.
And he got trapped.
Instantly. The departure fee, this massive, intentionally inflated sum, it was designed to make it nearly impossible for anyone but the absolute richest immigrants to ever leave Earth and go back to the stars. The authorities, they wanted to keep the few people who were trickling in.
So Pertos, even though he's earning thousands from his puppet shows, has been stuck on this godforsaken ball of mud, as he calls it, for 5 miserable years.
Right. He's making money, but the goalpost just keeps moving. He's rich enough to live comfortably, but he's never rich enough to buy his freedom.
And this environment, so clean, so beautiful, but so culturally sterile, it just makes his desperation worse.
Yeah, he finds Springson too sweet. It lacks the rough, vibrant energy that he associates with the rest of the galaxy. He's basically performing this high-concept alien art in a place that has no real cultural identity of its own.
Which leads him directly into a confrontation with the local opposition.
The Heritage League, yeah, they're the local manifestation of these culture wars, and Pertos is their #1 target.
What's their deal, exactly?
The League is small, but they're powerful. They're driven by this really purist ideology. Their goals are basically threefold: ban all foreign alien art forms, nurture what they see as a pure indigenous Earth culture, and most importantly, stop their sensitive young people from emigrating.
They see the young people leaving as a crisis.
A total crisis. They believe the only culture Earth has left is just shallow imitation, drawing influences from places like Pinot, Bleedin, Tree Light, the very places Pertos is from. So they see his alien theater as a kind of cultural pollution that's driving the disillusioned youth away.
And this antagonism, it escalates pretty quickly from just talk to action.
It does. Trimkin, the president of the Springson chapter, he confronts Pertos directly backstage at the Grand Theater. And he doesn't mince words. He tries to pay Pertos 10,000 postals, a lot of money, just to pack up the Furnace and leave town immediately.
It's an offer Pertos can't just ignore, but he turns it down flat.
Yeah, he's exhausted by the rhetoric, and he's trapped. He tells Trimkin, very pragmatically, that he needs to eat and he needs to leave Earth, and both of those things require way more money than 10,000 postals. He even sort of arrogantly says he makes 10 times that amount in a week anyway.
And then Trimkin pivots to threats.
Veiled threats, yeah. He suggests that perhaps more than speeches are required. And Pertos' defense here is really revealing. It just highlights how completely out of place he and his alien tech are on this quiet, rebuilt Earth.
He pulls out a pistol, a sleek, non-Earth pistol.
Right, a clear signal that he's not just some local artist, he's an off-worlder, and he's prepared for a fight. But the real defense, the thing that really stops Trimkin in his tracks, is the warning about the security system around the furnace.
The Olms clan amoeba.
The Olms clan amoeba. We're talking about this nearly invisible gelatinous film that spreads across the whole machine. It's super high-tech and specific. It's coded only to Pertos and Sebastian.
So if anyone tries to mess with it.
The amoeba delivers this debilitating, painful response. It's a completely silent, organic, high-tech barrier that just guarantees the furnace's safety.
So in the section, we see Pertos. He's trapped by a financial system, he's despised by the local culture, and he's relying on sophisticated alien weaponry and security just to get by. The stage is perfectly set for some kind of implosion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The tension is incredibly high, and the Heritage League has made it clear that they're willing to get violent. Pertos is now backed into a corner, relying on the very machine that is, at the same time, just completely sapping his soul.
This is where the technical deep dive really begins. Pertos' whole existence, it revolves around technology from the Vanapoan makers, an alien race that sounds like something from a horror movie, but their society is one of profound technical discipline.
The contrast is just so striking. The Vanapoans are described as spire lizards, and they come from this massive planet called Shaftau.
Right, and to put their homeworld in perspective, Shaftau is 8 times the size of Earth. Yet, it only has twice the gravity, which suggests, a unique, highly controlled internal makeup.
Yeah, and they're intensely private. They have this super technical society living mostly in these subterranean warrens. They're the ultimate example of creators who just prefer to stay unseen.
And they are the sole manufacturers of the furnaces. The machine Pertos uses to conjure up sentient life from, a synthetic fluid? Synthetic fluid, yeah. And the logistics of the furnace are interesting, too. It arrives in 9 separate pieces for easy interstellar transport. That's a necessary concession for commerce. But the security around the machine is absolute, designed to protect their proprietary bioengineering secrets better than any patent ever could.
That's the self-destruct mechanism, right?
That's it. If any casing is tampered with or pried open, the device instantly melts its own insides into smoking slag. It's a ruthless final protection.
So that, combined with the external security of the Olms clan amoeba, means Pertos is just completely reliant on the Vonapons. He is, like you said, just an operator,
Okay.
but he's operating a technology of profound, almost godlike power.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into the actual creation process. Pertos thinks of himself as just the operator,
Yeah.
but the process he starts is meticulous and incredibly fast, which suggests this terrifying mastery of bioengineering.
Well, the process starts with the mind, not the body. The core of the puppet's identity is in these identity wafers.
Which are what, exactly? They're small plastic discs, and they contain imprinted adult knowledge and a complete, fully formed personality structure, including lusts, fears, memories, all the skills.
And what's truly horrific about that is the psychological gap. You have a puppet whose chronological age, the amount of time they've actually been alive and conscious, is maybe 120 days total, spread out over years of performances.
Right, but they have the full intellectual grasp and emotional maturity of an adult.
That creates this inherent instability, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine having the wisdom and the sexual desires of a 30-year-old, but you're experiencing the world with the naive exuberance and limited resilience of an infant. That gap, that's the psychological crucible that just breeds rebellion.
So the wafer provides the soul, so to speak. The actual creation starts when he places this liquid synthetic flesh jelly into the capsule womb. And Pertos, the operator, he controls the physical transformation using two control knobs that cycle the light spectrum.
And this light cycle is the most visible, almost ritualistic part of the creation. It starts with green light, flooding the womb with energy, which then transitions into a rich crimson light. And the crimson light is what does the heavy lifting. It molds the jelly into the physical form.
The source material is very specific about this part. Hair appears instantly. In Biddy Belina's case, it's golden hair, and then her face forms, including her incredibly blue eyes.
Then the light transitions really quickly to a brilliantly pure white, and that signals the completion of the physical body. The whole process from liquid jelly to formed body is just a matter of intense, rapid transformation, all controlled by the light and the pre-programmed biomechanisms of the furnace.
But the body isn't truly alive yet, right?
Yeah.
Once they're formed, the puppets, who are small, 18 to 24 inches tall, they're immediately put into a nutrient bath.
And that nutrient bath is the crucial stage for them to accept life. It's what stimulates the nerve clusters in their synthetic flesh, forcing them to break out of this coma of non-being and accept the personality from the wafer. Without that step, they're just dormant, formed bodies.
And once they accept life, they are fully sentient, fully aware, and they immediately run into their fundamental limitation, the 1,000-yard leash.
This is the genius and the cruelty of the Vonapons' design. They built in this crucial restraint, a psychological and physical tether that ensures the puppet can't travel farther than 1,000 yards from the functioning furnace.
And if they try?
The source material describes the feeling as excruciating, unendurable pain. It's a physical enforcement mechanism that forces them back to the machine that gives them life.
Which effectively ensures their perpetual enslavement to the puppeteer, forcing them to always return to their creator and their inevitable destruction.
And this cycle creation, performance, forced death, it highlights Pertos' immense psychological burden. He doesn't hate the power, but he's plunged into this profound depression right after every successful creation.
Because he knows the process is intrinsically linked to destruction.
Exactly. He has to return these fully aware, fully sentient creatures back to lifeless, waiting liquid after the performance is over. The source notes that this constant act of dealing death to these fragile, beautiful beings was constantly sapping a man's soul.
So he seeks oblivion. This is where the Holistian Pearl comes in. It's his only solace. It's more than just a distraction. It's almost a symbiotic relationship.
It's his lifeline. The pearl is this living, jewel-like object that Pertos uses to escape the crushing reality of his life. When he touches it, the stone flashes with these alien images and complex visions.
What are those visions, though? Is it technical knowledge or just relief?
It's purely existential relief.
Mm.
They're cosmic alien visions that carry him across the universe, letting him forget he's trapped on Earth, and most importantly, letting him forget that doom would follow Genesis. It's a temporary neurological vacation, a substitute for a real spiritual life that lets him endure the profound guilt of being a constant executioner.
If he didn't have the pearl, he probably would have destroyed the furnace a long time ago.
I think so, yeah.
So you have a man who needs money to leave Earth, but the only way he can cope with Earning that money is by escaping into these alien visions while he forces his sentient creations into a cycle of life and death, binding them with excruciating pain. It's a profoundly unstable setup, just waiting for the slightest pressure to break it.
And that pressure comes from both without and within. You have this high-stakes environment, the cynical puppeteer, the enslaved creations, and then you have Sebastian, the massive, simple assistant whose frame is hiding that psychological time bomb we mentioned earlier.
Let's focus on Sebastian's internal state, because this is really the hinge point of the entire narrative. The source material calls him constantly somber, wrestling with insoluble irrelevancies. This is a deep, persistent, sort of diffuse guilt that he can never resolve, and it's always linked back to a repressed childhood memory involving a golden-haired girl named Jenny.
Yeah, the source is quite graphic and deliberate in detailing this trauma. As a child, Sebastian witnessed his parents having sex, and in his infantile mind, he fundamentally misinterpreted the act as violence. He saw his father stabbing his mother with a flesh knife.
And that single traumatic image fused sexual activity with extreme violence and death. He recalls bleeding, screaming, and a knife in the gut.
And this is why Sebastian has lived for years without desire, and why the guilt is constant. It resolves itself hundreds of times, but it always comes back. His subconscious has drawn a direct line between the intimate act and the ultimate act of violence. This fusion is precisely what makes him so volatile, especially around Biddy Belina, who happens to have the same golden hair as the Jenny from his repressed memory.
And the source shows us the exact moment the memory flashes. It's usually preceded by a vision of Belina, the object of his subconscious fear and desire, with blood pumping out of her stomach. It confirms that he sees her seductiveness and her very existence as a prelude to agonizing violence.
Now, onto the external pressure that exploits this vulnerability. Alvon Rudy. Rudy's not just a merchant. He's described by Pertos himself as the devil.
He's arrogant, patient, splendidly dressed in expensive fabrics, amber and blue, a sign of his intercontinental trade wealth.
And he comes backstage after Pertos' second performance in Springson and makes this calculated, predatory proposition.
He offers Pertos 25,000 postals. That's substantially more than the money Pertos would need for the departure fee. But the offer comes with a specific, dark condition.
He only wants to rent Biddy Belina.
For a unique experience, a play Rudy himself would write, enacted all night, of course. Pertos immediately understands the subtext. Rudy is asking to buy Belina's body in time for sexual pleasure.
And Pertos, despite his desperation and his need for freedom, he initially refuses. He tells Rudy he won't rent his creations for that purpose, citing the potential loss of his soul. Even this weary god has a line he won't cross.
But Rudy is the expert manipulator. He doesn't argue. He just shrugs, absolutely certain that Pertos is trapped by the departure fee and his own rising expenses. He predicts Pertos will inevitably give in, and he leaves, restless only because he has to waste time waiting for his prey to succumb.
And while Pertos is fighting this external moral collapse, the internal rebellion is speeding up. The puppets aren't just performing anymore, they're organizing.
Biddy Belina and the others, they demand a profound change in the script. Specifically, they're tired of watching Wissa, the evil stepmother, get killed every night with a sword to the neck. They're asking for human dignity and control over their own story.
They argue that they have a human gene structure, complete adult brains, and complex emotions, and therefore shouldn't be forced into this repetitive, tragic cycle. They're claiming their inherent humanity.
But the prince, who's often the realist of the group, he warns Belina against resisting too forcefully.
Right. He reminds her of Pertos' total power. Pertos could just refuse them food and water until they're too weak to fight back, or worse, he could stow us back in the furnace, returning them to permanent, featureless liquid plasm.
And Belina's response is the real shift from, acting troupe to political resistance. Her fury just escalates instantly, showing her emerging aptitude for violence and leadership. We could kill the old bastard!
And this suggestion of murder, fueled by her passionate leadership, it creates this volatile scene. When the prince tries to sexually soothe her, cupping her breasts in this public display of intimacy, it triggers Sebastian's deep-seated trauma instantly.
The fusion happens. Sebastian sees the sexual act, the golden hair, the potential violence, and he just short-circuits. He has an immediate accident, he wets himself, and he's ridiculed by the laughing puppets, including Belina. He wants to crush the prince, but the greater immediate fear of permanent death in the furnace holds his huge body back.
The scene is tragic because Sebastian's humiliation and internal horror lead to the first physical slip-up. His accident is probably why the adjoining door to Pertos' room is left unlocked.
That one small failure of oversight is all the Heritage League needed.
That night, Pertos is attacked by Trimkin and 4 of his men, making good on their threats. The puppet's complicity is clear. They enabled the attack by leaving the door open, seeing this as a form of non-lethal initial rebellion against their master.
Pertos barely survives the attack. He's crawling down the corridor, bloody and unconscious, and Sebastian, despite his clumsiness, uses the complex autodoc, a computerized physician that accelerates healing by sacrificing body fat for speed saving his life, but causing him to lose 6 pounds.
When Pertos recovers, his usual weariness is gone, replaced by this grim resolve. He immediately confronts the puppets because he knows they were involved. Belina tries to feign innocence, but Pertos no longer has the spiritual energy for sentimentality.
He forces her into a final, catastrophic agreement. 2 normal shows, a matinee, and then the extra show for an audience of 1. Rudy.
So Pertos, trapped by debt, threats from the League to burn his theater, and his own profound spiritual exhaustion, he has finally submitted. He sold the soul of his favorite creation, Belina, for the price of his own freedom.
The stage is now perfectly set for the final conflict. The tension between creation and creator, sex and violence, trauma and freedom is about to snap.
Yeah, and the narrative just accelerates violently from here. It unfolds in a series of falls that dismantle the whole power structure. The first fall involves the merchant, Alvan Rudy. Pertos, having made the deal, is in a deep trance with his Holistian Pearl, trying to escape the reality of his moral failure.
While Pertos is gone, Sebastian is just consumed by worry. He's afraid that Belina's new script means her permanent death, a death far worse than being liquefied in the furnace. So he staggers towards the room where Rudy and Belina are, just consumed by fear and these repressed memories.
And the moment he sees Belina naked, laughing, standing between Rudy's massive thighs, the trigger is pulled. The traumatic fusion of sex, violence, the golden hair, and the repressed Jenny memory just detonates. The image isn't Belina anymore. It's the knife in Jenny's gut all over again.
He goes berserk. He targets the source of the sexual violence, Rudy, but he's also symbolically attacking his own repressed past.
The scene is just instantaneous mayhem. Sebastian strangles Rudy to death. He also kills the prince, who foolishly stabs Sebastian's calf with his little stage sword by smashing him into a wall and snapping his neck.
And that is a critical, devastating detail. The prince, who had only ever simulated death on stage, mocking the fate of others, he dies a genuine, violent, irreversible death. The illusion of the play is just completely shattered. Life has become the violence of the stage.
Belina and the angel are wounded in the chaos.
And Pertos is awakened by the hysterical Wissa. When he finally stumbles into the carnage and understands what Sebastian has done, the source notes that he shows no anger, no fear, just this profound, weary sadness. This is the moment Pertos completely resigns from his role as a god.
His immediate reaction is purely pragmatic. Liquidation. He collects the dead prince and the wounded puppets, and he feeds them back into the furnace. And the puppets don't protest. They seem anxious to go, maybe recognizing that the violence of the world outside the furnace is far worse than the peace of the liquid state.
Pertos then collects Rudy's corpse, wraps it up, and takes all the money, 27,000 postals, the 25K payment plus 2K he found in Rudy's wallet. He has his freedom money, bought the highest spiritual cost. He's ready to pay the departure fees and leave Springson forever.
But the cycle of violence isn't over. The second fall is the death of Pertos himself. Sebastian wakes up sometime later to find his master dead, lying on the floor, his head slewed crooked, his shirt sodden with blood.
And the source material strongly implies Sebastian killed him during that initial berserk state, but Sebastian can't remember it.
Right, and that lack of memory is crucial. The fledgling deity has gained his power through fratricide, just as the opponents predicted, but he doesn't even remember doing it.
Sebastian's immediate impulse is driven by routine. He tries to recreate his master. He tries to feed Pertos' body into the furnace.
But the machine refuses to accept the human meat.
He has this terrifying moment of realization. There are no identity discs for full-sized humans like Pertos or himself. Pertos is gone for good, and Sebastian is now utterly alone, having murdered the person who gave him any direction or structure. The old world is completely gone.
And in the middle of this panic, the Heritage League, led by Trimkin, shows up again, ready to burn the truck.
And Sebastian, through desperate panic and lies, convinces Trimkin that Pertos has already paid his fee and left Earth. The sheer luck saves Sebastian from being discovered right then, allowing him to execute the third fall.
The third fall is the burial, and the final traumatic trigger. Sebastian takes both corpses, Rudy and Pertos, to the basement of the Grand Theater, and he pushes them into this dark, round drainage pit that served as the city's sewer. The water is black and swirling.
The moment the bodies disappear into that dark water, the memory fuses completely. The black, swirling water instantly triggers his repressed memory of Jenny falling from a cliff into a surging river, striking her head and being washed away. He's just recreated his original childhood trauma in the disposal of his master.
And the immediate psychological consequence is devastating paranoia. He had seen a large spider earlier in that dark subterranean basement, and he'd sensed its emanations. Now, as he drives the air-cushioned truck away from Springson, he becomes absolutely certain that the spider has boarded the vehicle. He feels it stalking him, waiting, using his guilt and trauma as a tracking mechanism.
So Sebastian has inadvertently murdered his master, funded his own escape, and then immediately plunged into a state of aimless terror, driven by trauma and crippling arachnophobia. He's transitioned from the obedient assistant to the fledgling god, unknowingly carrying the seeds of the next, much more successful revolution with him.
And Sebastian, the new clumsy deity, he drives north with no real destination, camping in the woods with his only companions, the dormant identity wafers. His early attempts at creation immediately confirmed that Vengeful and wisdom, that the new god is clumsy and unskilled, lacking the patience or precise control of his predecessor.
His first attempts are just utter failures. The use of the two knobs, color intensity and spectrum movement, it just confuses his simple mind. He ends up producing these deformed, monstrous puppets, melted faces, missing eyes, too many knuckles, bones in the wrong places.
He feeds these horrors back into the furnace, recognizing their deformity. But he keeps the only half-decent, though still disfigured, result. No name. Sebastian is just desperate for companionship, and his early creations really reflect the chaos in his own mind.
He continues to experiment, driven by this profound, if misguided, determination to resurrect Biddy Belina. He sees her as the solution that will resolve all his bad memories and guilt, conveniently forgetting that she was the one who betrayed him to the Heritage League in the first place.
He uses a puppet named Wolf, the villain from one of the original horror scripts, for practice. He convinces himself that if Wolf turns out deformed, well, it's only just punishment.
Once Sebastian finally masters the controls, learning the right knob is for color intensity and the left is for spectrum movement, he achieves 4 perfect resurrections of Wolf. But during a momentary lapse of concentration, while Wolf is achieving full consciousness in the nutrient bath, that Vanapadan warning comes true.
Wolf, fully conscious and sentient, immediately escapes the 1,000-yard leash before his consciousness can fully integrate the restraint. And Wolf, carrying the vivid traumatic memory of being butchered and liquefied multiple times, is filled not with gratitude, but with rage and terror.
And this first, true act of freedom is devastating. Wolf immediately murders Ben Samuels, the kind old woodsman who had been helping Sebastian charge his battery. Then Wolf brutally shreds No Name before Sebastian manages to tear Wolf's head off in a desperate struggle.
This incident confirms the inherent danger of mistreating sentient creations, and it solidifies Sebastian's primal fear of having multiple volatile puppets alive at once. But this lesson is quickly overridden by his overwhelming loneliness and desire for Belina. So he finally resurrects Biddy Belina perfectly.
And she returns, subdued at first because she has the full memory of Sebastian killing her and the prince in the theater. But her political and tactical skill is immediately obvious. She quickly learns how to manipulate her huge, clumsy creator, noticing his profound, almost paralyzing terror of the spiders he saw at a fueling station automat.
This is Belina's genius, the weaponization of phobia. At a fueling station, she finds 2 large brown spiders, each the size of Sebastian's thumb, in a dusty corner, and she captures them in a clear plastic salt shaker.
And that salt shaker becomes the most effective weapon against the fledgling god. That night, she confronts Sebastian, who is reduced to a panic, whimpering mess when she holds the spiders inches from his terrified face.
She uses this crippling arachnophobia to instantly establish herself as the true power. Her command is simple and immediate. Sebastian must remove the Ohms clan amoeba shield and resurrect the rest of the Trupusa, the prince, the suitors, and the angel.
She seals the deal with a psychological barb, asking, "Do you want me to keep Pertos bottled up?" implying that she controls his fate, his memories, and his ultimate guilt through the terror of the spiders. And Sebastian, defeated and terrified, agrees, creating the new, powerful, and utterly ruthless ruling class.
And the source material explicitly connects Belina's subsequent behavior seducing Sebastian, then instantly turning on him, to the philosophy of the rogue scene Ecclesian.
Right. Ecclesian's principle states so the newly elevated god, in this case Sebastian, will be usurped by his children, the puppets. Why does she move so fast?
Belina sees sex purely as a political tool to gain control. She tries to seduce him, But Sebastian's repressed trauma actually saves him from that intimacy. She realizes that his trauma makes him too dangerous to be a lover. He's just too volatile and uncontrollable.
And Ecclesian demands that the new god must be crushed while he is still sympathetic and before he becomes cynical.
Exactly. Belina understands that Sebastian is vulnerable precisely because he's clumsy and fearful. If they waited, Sebastian might become as hardened and calculating as Pertos was, and their victory would be much harder. Her destiny, therefore, mandates the immediate murder of her creator.
She sees the path forward, realizing that to establish their new rule, Sebastian has to be dismantled slowly and psychologically, using his greatest fear against him.
So the new puppet collective, now 37 strong, led by the utterly ruthless Biddy Belina, travels to their final, perfect destination. Abandoned, pristine, ice-blue metropolis. This ghost city was built long ago for immigrants who, ironically, never came back.
It is the ultimate resource base. The city is completely automated and fully operational, maintained by these minimally conscious maintenance robots, and it's equipped with transport systems, food automats, every facility you can imagine. It's an untouched, clean slate for a burgeoning new, violent civilization.
And Belina doesn't waste any time. She forces Sebastian to transport and set up the furnace. She continues the creation process relentlessly, lying to Sebastian that the extra figures he sees are just reflections or a surprise, until their numbers reach 37.
And their primary task, once they're organized, is plotting the death of their creator. The source notes that they want a long entertainment. Sebastian can't die quickly. His death has to be a spectacle of psychological torment.
Before they execute their master, they use the unexpected arrival of a gypsy trucker, the same one Sebastian had met weeks earlier, as a trial run, a rehearsal for organized violence.
This is a key moment in their evolution. They ambush the trucker using his own cargo van, forcing it to hover and then descend 10 feet, chopping him up with the air cushion blades in this protracted, messy death. And the reaction of the puppets is telling. Belina and Wissa immediately smear themselves with the trucker's blood, finding this intense, primal pleasure in the violence. They are actively embracing a culture of pain pleasure. So the execution of Sebastian, therefore, is a masterpiece of prolonged, calculated psychological torture, custom designed to exploit his deepest, most crippling fear. His arachnophobia fused with his guilt over Pertos.
First, the paralysis. They use the insecticide they acquired to herd the spiders, a massive swarm of 140 brown, thumb-sized spiders and one truly terrifying tarantula into the room, trapping Sebastian inside. He's instantly reduced to a catatonic state, paralyzed by terror and exhaustion.
And with Sebastian unable to fight or flee, the puppets enact this gruesome setup. They retrieve the gypsy trucker's severed head, shave it, and dye the hair stark white, making sure it looks exactly like the corpse of Pertos Godelhausser.
They place this grotesque facsimile of his former master in the air duct and shine a light directly into its open mouth, forcing Sebastian to confront the father he murdered. The psychological torture is complete when the final cruel touch is delivered. A dark green spider crawls out of the dead, white-haired mouth.
Sebastian breaks completely. He just screams uncontrollably, having been forced to confront the manifestation of his guilt, his trauma, and his fear all at once.
In his catatonic state, the puppets tie him down to ring bolts on the floor, his arms spread like a dead bird, ready for the final ritualistic act. They use steak knives stolen from the automat to pierce his palms and feet, mimicking the crucifixion of a demigod in an old play.
As he's slowly dying, they taunt him with the severed head, demanding an apology for dethroning Pertos. Sebastian, utterly defeated by the terror and exhaustion, can only quietly call for the forgiveness of the others, presumably the puppets he created and destroyed. He dies quietly, unheroically, without resistance.
And with Sebastian dead, Belina and the puppets enact the final, most crucial step of their revolution, the destruction of the furnace. They smash the glass, they rip out the components, and they trigger the self-destruct mechanism, melting the entire machine into smoking slag.
This is the ultimate profound sacrifice. They forfeit their individual immortality, the ability to be instantly recreated from liquid flesh for collective, absolute mobility. The 1,000-yard leash is broken, but they've chosen a finite, violent life over endless, controlled rebirth. They are truly free, and their freedom mandates war.
The new race, the puppet empire, rises rapidly within the ghost city. They use the city's complex facilities and dormant computers to forge highly effective weapons and, very quickly, to learn war. They begin to reproduce, bearing children who are described as even more fierce and relentless than their parents. This is a civilization based entirely on the pursuit of pain pleasure.
Earth's subsequent conquest is swift and brutally one-sided. They attack the rich and soft cities of Earth Spring Sun, Falling Water, November Moon. The battle-hardened, emotion-driven puppets are unstoppable against the complacent remaining human population.
And their ambition immediately expands beyond Earth. They launch themselves into the stars, becoming, as the source notes, the most brutal and effective warriors the galaxy has ever seen, forcing entire civilizations to flee their advance. War wasn't just a tactic to them. War was existence, the purpose of being.
But, as always in this narrative, the cycle of creation and destruction turns one last time, driven by the original makers.
Yes, the final ironic defeat comes from the original Vanapu makers themselves. The puppet empire is eventually crushed by another, specifically tailored breed of warrior puppets created by the Vanapuans, many-legged and many-armed spider beings, bringing the technology and the theme of the spider full circle.
The source material just refuses to let this be a simple action story. It concludes with this profound philosophical context from the ancient texts of the Vanapuan makers. And this really provides the lens through which we should understand the entire conflict.
It connects the miniature tragedy of Pertos and Belina to a universal law. We have two key insights here, starting with Saint Zenopal, who describes the cyclical nature of power and the inevitability of poor leadership.
Zenopal says, "The identity of God changes as his children unseat him. Each generation we come under the hand of a fledgling deity who has gained his power through fratricide."
And here's the punchline that explains all the chaos. This explains why God is clumsy and why his wisdom has never equaled that of his creations. He never had a full lifetime in which to learn.
Let's look at how that plays out. Pertos was the initial god-weary, cynical but experienced. Sebastian, the unwitting god, gained his power through fratricide by murdering Rudy and implicitly Pertos. And his reign was a disaster of clumsy creations and fear.
And Belina, the cunning creation, she recognized this clumsiness immediately. She understood that Sebastian had the power, but not the wisdom or the emotional stability to wield it effectively. Zenopal explains the entire mechanism. Power is acquired by violence, and the new leader is always less prepared than the old, leading to perpetual turmoil.
And then there's the rogue Saint Ecclesian, who is far more radical and provides the intellectual justification for what the puppets did. Ecclesian argues that humanity can rejoice in our humanity, for there will come a day when God's creatures will have grown more powerful than he. Then we will rise up and depose him.
Ecclesian lays the blame squarely at the feet of the Creator, arguing, all the cruelty of man is the responsibility of God. This is profound. It suggests that the inherent flaws, the lusts, the fears, the violent tendencies of the puppets are not their own fault, but a direct reflection of the carelessness, the spiritual fatigue, or the original design flaws of their creator, Pertos.
And this is exactly what Belina grasped intuitively. Ecclesian demands that the new god must be crushed when he is still sympathetic and before he becomes cynical.
And Sebastian was sympathetic. He felt immense guilt. He was motivated by a twisted form of love for Belina, and he was terrified of causing harm. That sympathy, coupled with his paralyzed state of trauma, made him weak. If they had waited for him to harness his power and become cynical like Pertos, the window for revolution would have closed. Belina had to act when his weakness was at its absolute peak.
The narrative ends with a reflection from a Vanapoan artisan who has experienced the entire saga through the visions of the Holistian Pearl, and he's pondering Ecclesian's final provocative words.
Ecclesian suggests that the Vanapoans, who pride themselves on creating these realistic miniature puppets, should examine the universe more closely. Perhaps if we spent less time playing gods in this respect and examined the universe more closely, we would discover that we are all only puppets ourselves on a much greater scale.
It's the ultimate twist, connecting the miniature tragedy of the furnace to the grand galactic stage. The creators themselves are controlled. They have their own scripts, their own repetitious cycles, in their case, the constant creation of warring mini-societies. And they are themselves just performing a role.
The Vanapoan artisan concludes that somewhere in the vastness there are voices that laugh at us, implying that even their highly advanced society is subject to the same clumsy, cyclical pattern of usurpation and destruction that they designed into the furnace.
What stands out most profoundly from this entire deep dive for me is the ultimate choice made by the puppets. They were offered guaranteed, comfortable, endless immortality through recreation, and they decisively rejected it.
They sacrificed their highest value eternal life for collective mobility and the finite, violent purpose of war. Freedom for these creations meant the right to self-determination, even if that path was self-destructive and short-lived.
The sociology of this manufactured conflict shows that the pursuit of self-determination for Belina mandated the complete physical and spiritual obliteration of the previous two authors of their existence, Pertos and Sebastian.
And the layered irony is relentless. The puppets rebelled against their human masters by weaponizing arachnophobia, and they were ultimately defeated by warrior puppets, many-legged spider beings, created by their original, highly technical alien masters, the Vonopoans. The themes of the spider, the creator, and the destroyer are just perfectly woven together.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? This story presents a chilling, universal pattern inherent in the structure of power: creation, betrayal, usurpation, and destruction. If the universe's ultimate structure is, as the Vonopoan texts suggest, merely a story written by an invisible hand, does the pursuit of freedom always mandate the death of the previous author, whether that author is a weary puppeteer, a traumatized assistant, or whatever vast, clumsy deity governs our own sphere? We'll let you chew on that one.